Who goes there? Chapter 11. Is Blair loose? Somebody asked. Blair is not loose, or he flew in. If there's any doubt about where our gentle helper came from, this may clear it up. Van Hel held up a foot-long thin-blade knife in a cloth. The wooden handle was half burnt, charred with a peculiar pattern of the top of the galley stove. Clark stared at it. I did that this afternoon. I forgot the damn thing and left it on the stove. Van Wall nodded. I smelled it. If you remember, I knew the knife came from the galley. I wonder, said Benning, looking around at the party warily, how many more monsters have we? If somebody could slip out of this place, go back of the screen to the galley, and then down to the Cosmo house and back. He did come back, didn't he? Yes? Everybody's here? Well, if one of the gang could do all that... Maybe a monster did it, Gary suggested quietly. There's that possibility. A monster? As you pointed out today, only men left to imitate. Would it decrease his supply, shall we say? Van Wall pointed out, no, we just have a plain, ordinary louse, a murderer to deal with. Ordinarily, we'd call him an inhuman murderer, but I suppose... But we have to distinguish now. We have an inhuman murderer, and now we have a human murderers. Or one, at least. There's one less human, Nora said softly. Maybe the monsters have the balance of power now. Never mind that, McCready sighed and turned to Barkley. Bar, will you get your electric gadget? I'm going to make certain. Barkley turned down the corridor to get the pronged electrocutor while McCready and Van Wall went back towards Cosmo's house. Barkley followed them in some 30 seconds. The corridor to Cosmo's house twisted, as did nearly all corridors in the big magnet, and Norris stood at the entrance again, but they heard, rather muffled, McCready's sudden shout. There was a savage scurry of blows, thud, chunk, shuffle, bar, and a curious, savage, mewing scream, silenced before even quick-moving Norris had reached the bend. Kiner, or what had been Kiner, laid on the floor, cut half in two by the great knife McCready had had. The meteorologist stood against the wall, the knife dripping red in his hand. Van Wall was stirring vaguely on the floor, moaning, his hand half-consciously rubbing his jaw. Barkley, an unutterable savage gleam in his eye, was methodically leaning on the pronged weapon in his hand, jabbing. Kiner's arm had developed a queer, scaly fur, and the flesh had twisted. The fingers had shortened, the hand rounded, the fingernails becoming 3 inches long things of dull red horn, keen to steel-hard, razor-sharp talons. McCready raised his head, looked at the knife in his hand, and dropped it. Well, whoever did it can speak up now. He was an inhuman murderer at that. In that he murdered an inhuman. I swear, by all that is holy, Kiner was a lifeless corpse on the floor when we arrived here. But when we found it, we were going to jab it with the power. It changed. Norris stared unsteadily. Oh, Lord, those things can act. Ye gods! Sitting in here for hours, mouthing prayers to a god it hated, shouting hymns in a cracked voice, hymns about a church it never knew, driving us mad with its ceaseless howling. Well, speak up, whoever did it. You didn't know it, but you did the camp a favor. And I want to know how in blazes you got out of that room without anyone seeing you. It might help in guarding ourselves. His screaming, his singing, even the sound projector couldn't drown it out, Clark shivered. It was a monster. Oh, said Van Wall in sudden comprehension. You were sitting right next to the door, weren't you? And almost behind the projector screen already. Clark nodded dumbly. It's quiet now. It's dead. Mac, your test's no damn good. It was dead anyway. Monster or man, it was dead. McCready chuckled softly. Boys, meet Clark. The only one we know is human. Meet Clark, the one who proves he's human by trying to commit murder and failing. Will the rest of you please refrain from trying to prove you're human for a while? I think we may have another test." "A test?" Connaught snapped joyfully. Then his face sagged in disappointment. "I suppose it's in either way you want it." "No," said Macready steadily. "Look sharp and be careful. Come into the ad building. Barkley, bring your electrocutor. And somebody, Dutton, stand with Barkley to make sure he does it. Watch every neighbor, for by the hell these monsters come from, I've got something, and they know it. They're going to get dangerous." The group tensed abruptly. An air of crushing menace entered into every man's body. Sharply they looked at each other, more keenly than ever before. "Is that man next to me an inhuman monster?" "What is it?" Gary asked, as they stood against the main room. "How long will it take?" "I don't know exactly," said Macready, his voice brittle with angry determination. "But I know it will work, and no two ways about it. It depends on a basic quality of monsters, not on us. Kiner just convinced me." He stood heavy and solid, in bronzed immobility, completely sure of himself again at last. "This," said Barkley, hefting the wooden-handled weapon, "tipped with its two sharp points, charged conductors, is going to be rather necessary, I take it." "As the power plant assured?" Dutton nodded sharply. "The automatic stoker bin is full. The gas power plant is on standby. Van Wall and I set it for the movie operation, and we've checked it over rather carefully several times, you know. Anything those wires touch dies," he assured them grimly. "I know that." Dr. Cooper stirred vaguely in his bunk, rubbing his eyes with fumbling hands. He sat up slowly, blinked his eyes, blurred with sleep and drugs, widened with an unutterable horror of drug-ridden nightmares. "Gary," he mumbled. "Gary, listen. Selfish, from hell they came, and hellish selfish. What do I mean?" He sank back in his bunk and snored softly. Macready looked at him thoughtfully. "We'll know presently." He nodded slowly. "But selfish is what you mean, all right. You may have thought of that, half sleeping, dreaming there. I didn't have to stop thinking what dreams you might be having, but that's all right. Selfish is the word. They must be, you see." He turned to the men in the cabin, tense, silent men, staring with wolfish eyes, each at his neighbor. "Selfish, and as Dr. Copper said, every part is a whole. Every piece is self-sufficient, an animal in itself. That, and one other thing, tell the story. There's nothing mysterious about blood. It's just as normal, a body tissue, as a piece of muscle or a piece of liver. But it hasn't so much connective tissue, though it has millions, billions of life cells." Macready, great bronze beard ruffled in a grim smile. "This is satisfying in a way. I'm pretty sure we humans still outnumber you, others standing here, and we have what your otherworld race evidently doesn't. Not an imitated, but bred in the bone instinct. A driving, unquenchable fire that's genuine. We'll fight. Fight with a ferocity you may attempt to imitate. But you're never equal. We're human. We're real. Your imitations, false to the core of your every cell. All right. It's a showdown now, you know. You with your mind reading. You've lifted the idea from my brain. You can't do a thing about it. Standing here. Let it pass. Blood is tissue they have to bleed. If they don't bleed when cut, then by heaven they're phony. Phony from hell. If they bleed, then that blood, separated from them, is an individual, a newly formed individual in its own right, just as they split, all of them, from one original, are individuals. Get it, Van? See the answer bar? Van Wall laughed very softly. The blood will not obey. It's a new individual, with all the desire to protect its own life that the original, the main mass from which it was split, has. Blood will live and try and crawl away from a hot needle, say. Macready picked up the scalpel from the table. From the cabinet he took a rack of test tubes. a tiny alcohol lamp, and a length of platinum wire set in a little glass rod. A smile of grim satisfaction rose from his lips. For a moment he glanced up at those around him. Barclay and Dutton moved towards him slowly, the wooden-handled instrument alert. "Dutton," said Macready, "suppose you stand over by the splice there where you've connected that in. Make sure nothing pulls it loose." Dutton moved away. "Now, Van, suppose you be the first on this." White-faced, Van Wall stepped forward. With a delicate precision, Macready cut a vein in the base of his thumb. Van Wall winced slightly, then held steady as a half an inch of bright blood collected in the tube. Macready put the tube in the rack, gave Van Wall a bit of alum, and indicated the iodine bottle. Van Wall stood motionlessly watching. Macready heated the platinum wire in the alcohol flame lamp, then dipped it into the tube. It hissed softly. 5 times he repeated the test. "Human, I'd say." Macready sighed and straightened. "As yet, my theory hasn't been actually proven, but I have hopes. I have hopes. Don't, by the way, get too interested in this. We'll have some of us unwelcome ones, no doubt. Van, will you relieve Barclay at the switch?" "Thank you. Okay, Barclay. And may I say I hope you stay with us. You're a damn good guy." Barclay grinned uncertainly, winced under the keen edge of the scalpel. Presently, smiling widely, he retrieved his long-handled weapon. "Mr. Samuel Dutt, bar!" The tensity was released in that section. Whatever of hell the monsters may have had within them, the men in that instant matched it. Barclay had no chance to move his weapon as a score of men poured down on that thing that had seemed Dutton. It mewed and spat and tried to grow fangs, and was 100 broken, torn pieces. Without knives or weapons save the brute-given strength of a staff of picked men, the thing was crushed, rent. Slowly they picked themselves up, their eyes smoldering, very quiet in their emotions. A curious wrinkling of their lips betrayed a species of nervousness. Barclay went over with the electric weapon. Things smoldering and stank. The caustic acid Van Wall dropped on each spilled drop of blood gave off tickling, cough-profusing fumes. Macready grinned, his deep-set eyes all light and dancing. "Maybe," he said, softly, "I underrated man's ability when I said nothing human could have had the ferocity in the eyes of that thing we found. I wish we could have the opportunity to treat in a more befitting manner these things. Something with boiling oil or melted lead in it, or maybe slow roasting in the power boiler. When I think what a man Dutton was. Never mind, my theory is confirmed by one who knew. Well, Van Wall and Barclay are proven, I think. Then that'll try to show you what I already knew. That I too am human." Macready swished the scalpel in absolute alcohol, burned it off the metal blade, and cut the base of his thumb expertly. 20 seconds later, he looked up from the desk at the waiting men. There were more grins out there now, friendly grins, yet withal something else in the eyes. "Conant," Macready laughed softly, "was right. The huskies watching that thing in the corridor bend had nothing on you. Wonder why we think only the wolf blood has the right to ferocity. Maybe on spontaneous viciousness a wolf takes tops. But after these 7 days, abandon all hope, ye wolves who enter here. Maybe we can save time. Conant, would you step forward?" Again Barclay was too slow. There were more grins, less tensity still, when Barclay and Van finished their work. Gary spoke in a low, bitter voice. "Conant was one of the finest men we had here, and 5 minutes ago I'd have sworn he was a man. Those damnable things are more than imitation." Gary shuddered and sat back in his bunk. And 30 seconds later, Gary's blood shrank from the hot platinum wire and struggled to escape the tube, struggled as frantically as a sudden, feral, red-eyed, dissolving imitation of Gary struggled to dodge the snake-tongued weapon. Barclay advanced at him. white-faced and sweating. The thing in the test tube screamed with a tinny voice as Macready dropped it into the glowing coal of the gallery stove. Chapter 12. The last of it, Dr. Copper looked down from his bunk with bloodshot, saddened eyes. 14 of them. Macready nodded shortly. In some ways, if only we could have permanently prevented their spread, I'd like to have even the imitation back. Commander Gary, Conant, Dutton, Clark. Where are they taking those things? Copper noted the stretchers Barclay and Norris were carrying out. Outside on the ice, where they've got 15 smashed crates, half a ton of coal, and presently we'll add 10 gallons of kerosene. We've dumped acid on every spilled drop, every torn fragment. We're going to incinerate those. Sounds like a good plan, Copper nodded wearily. I wonder if you hadn't said whether Blair... Macready started. We forgot him! We had so much else. I wonder, do you suppose we can cure him now? If, began Dr. Copper and stopped meaning. Macready started a second time. Even a madman. It imitated Kiner in his praying hysteria. Macready turned towards Van Wall at the long table. Van, we've got to make an expedition to Blair's shack. Van looked up sharply. The frown of worry faded for an instant in surprised remembrance. Then he rose, nodded. Barclay better go along. He applied the lashings and may figure out how to get in without frightening Blair too much. 3/4 of an hour through -37 cold, while the aurora curtain bellied overhead. The twilight was nearly 12 hours long, flaming in the north on snow like white crystalline sands under their skis. A 5-mile wind piled it in drift lines pointing off to the northwest. 3/4 of an hour to reach the snow-buried shack. No smoke came from the little shack, and the men hastened. Blair! Barclay roared into the wind when he was still 100 yards away. Blair! Shut up, said Macready softly, and hurry. He may be trying a long hike. If we have to go after him, no planes. The tractor's disabled. Would a monster have a stamina a man has? A broken leg wouldn't stop it for more than a minute, Macready pointed out. Barclay gasped suddenly and pointed aloft. Dim in the twilight sky, a winged thing circled in curves of indescribable grace and ease. Great white wings tipped gently, and the bird swept over them in silent curiosity. Albatross, Barclay said softly. First of the season, and wandering way inland for some reason, if a monster's loose. Norris bent down on the ice and tore hurriedly at his heavy windproof clothing. He straightened, his coat flapping open, a grim blue-metalled weapon in his hand. It roared a challenge to the white silence of Antarctica. The thing in the air screamed hoarsely. Its great wings worked frantically as a dozen feathers floated down from its tail. Norris fired again. The bird was moving swiftly now, but in an almost straight line of retreat. It screamed again. More feathers dropped, and with beating wings it soared behind the ridge of pressure ice to vanish. Norris hurried after the others. It won't come back, he panted. Barclay cautioned him to silence, pointing. A curious, fierce blue light beat out of the cracks of the shack's door. A very low, soft humming sounded inside. A low, soft humming and a clink and clank of tools. The very sound somehow bearing a message of frantic haste. Macready's face paled. Lord help us if that thing has... He grabbed Barclay's shoulder and made sniping motions with his finger, pointing towards the lacing of control cables that held the door. Barclay drew the wire cutters from his pocket and knelt soundlessly at the door. The snap and twang of cut wires made an unbearable racket in the utter quiet of the Antarctic hush. There was only that strange, sweetly soft hum from within the shack, and the queerly hectical, clipped clicking and rattling of tools to drown their noise. Macready peered through a crack in the door. His breath sucked in huskily, and his great fingers clamped cruelly on Barclay's shoulder. The meteorologist backed down. "It isn't," he explained very softly. "Blair. It's kneeling on something on the bunk, something that it keeps lifting. Whatever it's working on is a thing like a knapsack, and it lifts it." "All at once," Barclay said grimly. "No, Norris, hang back and get that iron of yours out. It may have weapons." Together, Barclay's powerful body and MacReady's giant strength struck the door. Inside, the bunk jammed against the door, screeching madly and crackling into kindling. The door flung down from the broken hinges, the patched lumber of the doorpost dropping inward. Like a blue rubber ball, a thing bounced up. One of its 4 tentacle arms looped out like a striking snake. In a 7-tentacled hand, a 6-inch pencil of winking, shining metal glinted and swung upward to face them. Its line-thin lips twitched back from snake fangs in a grin of hate, red eyes blazing. Norris's revolver thundered in the confined space. The hate-washed face twitched in agony. The looping tentacle snatched back. The silvery thing in its hand, a smashed ruin of metal. The 7-tentacled hand became a mass of mangled flesh oozing greenish-yellow ichor. The revolver thundered 3 times more. Dark holes drilled into each of the 3 eyes before Norris hurled the empty weapon against its face. The thing screamed, a feral hate, a lashing tentacle whipping at blinded eyes. For a moment it crawled on the floor, savage tentacles lashing out, the body twitching. Then it staggered up again, blinded eyes working, boiling hideously, the crushed flesh sloughing away in sudden goblets. Barclay lurched to his feet and dove forward with an ice axe. The flat of the weighty thing crushed against the side of the head. Again, the unkillable monster went down. The tentacles lashed out, and suddenly Barclay fell to his feet in the grip of a living, livid rope. The thing dissolved as he held it, a white, hot band that ate into the flesh of his hands like living fire. Frantically, he tore the stuff from him, held his hands where they could not be reached. The blind thing felt and ripped at the tough, heavy, windproof cloth, seeking flesh. Flesh it could convert. A huge blowtorch MacReady had brought coughed solemnly. Abruptly it rumbled, disapproval throatily. Then it laughed gurglingly and thrust out a blue-white 3-foot tongue. The thing on the floor shrieked, flailing out blindly with the tentacles that writhed and withered in the bubbling wrap of the blowtorch. It crawled and turned on the floor. It shrieked and hobbled madly. But always MacReady held the blowtorch on the face, the dead eyes burning and bubbling, useless. Frantically the thing crawled and howled. A tentacle sprouted a savage talon and crisped in the flame. Steadily MacReady moved with a planned grim campaign. Helplessly, maddened, the thing retreated from the grunting torch, the caressing, licking tongue. For a moment it rebelled, squalling in inhuman hatred at the touch of icy snow. Then it fell back before the charring breath of the torch, the stench of its flesh bathing it hopelessly in retreat. On and on across Antarctic snow. The bitter wind swept over its twisting, the torch tongue. Vainly it flopped, a trail of oily, stinking smoke bubbling away from it. MacReady walked back towards the shack silently. Barclay met him at the door. "No more?" the giant meteorologist asked grimly. Barclay shook his head. "No more. It didn't split." "It had other things to think about," MacReady assured him. "When I left it, it was a glowing coal. What was it doing?" Norris laughed shortly. "Wise boys we are. Smashing magnetos so planes won't work. Rip the boiler tubing out of the tractor and leave that thing alone for a week in this shack, alone and undisturbed." MacReady looked in at the shack more carefully. The air, despite the ripped door, was hot and humid. On a table at the far end of the room rested a thing of coiled wires and small magnets, glass tubing and radio tubes. At the center of a block of rough stone rested. From the center of the block came the light that flooded the place, a fierce blue light, bluer than the glare of an electric arc, and from it came the sweetly soft hum. Off to one side was another mechanism of crystal glass, blown with an incredible neatness and delicacy, metal plates and a queer, shimmery sphere of insubstantiality. "What is that?" MacReady moved nearer. Norris grunted. "Leave it for investigation. But I can guess pretty well. That's atomic power. That stuff to the left, that's a neat little thing for doing what men have been trying to do with a 100-ton cyclotron and so forth. It separates neutrons from heavy water, which he was getting from the surrounding ice. Where did he get all... Oh, of course, a monster couldn't be locked in or out. He's been through the apparatus's caches." MacReady stared at the apparatus. Lord, what minds that race must have. The shimmering sphere, I think it's a sphere of pure force. Neutrons can pass through any matter, and he wanted a supply reservoir of neutrons. Just project neutrons against silica, calcium, beryllium, almost anything, and the atomic energy is released. That thing is an atomic generator. MacReady plucked a thermometer from his coat. It's 120 in here, despite the open door. Our clothes have kept the heat out to an extent, but I'm sweating now. Norris nodded. The light's cold, I found that, but it gives off heat to warm the place through the coil. He had all the power in the world. He could keep it warm and pleasant, as his race thought of warm and pleasantness. Did you notice the light? The color of it? MacReady nodded. Beyond the stars is the answer. From beyond the stars. From a hotter planet that circled a brighter, bluer sun they came. MacReady glanced out of the door towards the blasted, smoke-stained trail that flopped and wandered blindly off across the drift. There won't be any more coming, I guess. Sheer accident it landed here. And that was 20 million years ago. What did it do all that for? He nodded towards the apparatus. Barclay laughed softly. Did you notice what it was working on when we came in? Look. He pointed towards the ceiling of the shack, like a knapsack made of flattened coffee tins, with dangling cloth straps and leather belts. The mechanism clung to the ceiling. A tiny glaring heart of supernal flame burned in it, yet burned through the ceiling's wood without scorching it. Barclay walked over to it, grasped two of the dangling straps in his hand, and pulled it down with an effort. He strapped it about his body. A slight jump carried him a weird, slow arc across the room. "Anti-gravity," said MacReady softly. "Anti-gravity," Norris nodded. "Yes, we had him stopped, with no planes and no birds." The birds hadn't come, but they had coffee tins and radio parts and glass and the machine shop at night. And a whole week, all to itself. America in a single jump, with an anti-gravity powered by the atomic energy of matter. We had him stopped another half hour. It was just tightening these straps on the device so it could wear it. And we'd have stayed in Antarctica and shot down any moving thing that came from the rest of the world. "The albatross," MacReady said softly. "Do you suppose, with this thing almost finished, with that death weapon in its hand? No, by the grace of God, who evidently does hear very well, even down here, in the margin of half an hour, we kept our world, and the planets of the system too. Anti-gravity, you know, the atomic power, because they came from another sun, a star beyond the stars. They came from a world with a bluer sun." The end. So quoth this raven. I hope you enjoyed this story, darlings, and if you did, please like. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And if you want to say anything about it, offer suggestions of what you would like read, just say hi. Please do that too. It helps me out, especially I'm trying to get things up and going again. I will throw this all together in one video so you have a complete audiobook when you want to listen. And I hope your day is absolutely beautiful, my darlings. Bye-bye.